The air smelled of dust, oil, and fear. The alien market was loud that day, filled with shouts, metal cages, and the sound of chains dragging across cracked concrete. Under the burning twin suns, dozens of eyes watched as the auction began. Humans, traders, and soldiers stood waiting for the next item to be brought out. Then the announcer's voice echoed through the square. Last one on the block. The final alien slave. Everyone turned to see her. A small figure was pushed forward by guards. Thin, weak, her skin covered with dirt and bruises. Her silver hair clung to her face, tangled and dry. The alien girl could barely walk. She stumbled, falling to her knees, but no one helped her. The crowd laughed. "She's half dead already," one human whispered. "Not worth the food to keep her alive," another said. The girl's eyes stayed low, empty. She didn't even try to defend herself. She had no name anymore, just a number burned into the metal collar around her neck. The announcer lifted her chin roughly. "See, not even a spark left in her. You can do whatever you want with this one. Starting bid, 10 credits. No one raised a hand. 10 credits. Anyone? Silence. 5 then. 5 credits. The announcer looked angry now. He kicked dust near her face. Useless creature. Won't even speak. She stayed still, breathing softly like a ghost waiting to disappear. Then from the edge of the crowd a voice spoke, quiet but firm. "I'll take her." Heads turned, a tall human man stepped forward. He wore a simple jacket torn from travel. His face was rough, sunburned, and tired, but his eyes, calm and steady, caught everyone's attention. The announcer frowned. "You don't joke, stranger." "She's not worth it," the man shrugged. "Didn't ask if she was." "How much?" The crowd began whispering. "Is he serious? Why would a human want that thing?" "He must be crazy," the announcer sighed. "Fine, 2 credits and she's yours. Take the trash away." The man reached into his pocket and dropped 2 silver coins into the announcer's hand. Then he walked toward the cage. The girl flinched when he got close, expecting a blow, but instead he knelt beside her. "Can you stand?" he asked softly. She didn't answer. He gently took her arm, lifting her to her feet. Her legs shook under her thin frame. She tried to pull away, but he didn't grip hard. Instead, he placed his worn-out jacket over her shoulders. "Let's go," he said quietly. The guards opened the gate, laughing as they stepped aside. "She's all yours, hero. Hope you enjoy your charity." He didn't respond. He simply guided her out of the market, through the crowd that parted in silence. Some mocked him, others looked confused. One man muttered, "Humans are losing their minds, saving aliens now." But the human didn't care. As they walked through the narrow street, the girl finally spoke, her voice weak, broken, almost childlike. Why did you buy me?" He looked at her. "Because no one else would." She lowered her head, not understanding. "You could have chosen anyone." "Why me?" he sighed. "Because you're still alive." She stared at him as if he had said something impossible. For a moment she forgot the pain in her body. No one had ever spoken to her like that. Not since her world burned. Not since her people were taken. They walked for hours under the twin suns until they reached the edge of the city, where the ruins ended and dry grass began. The girl stumbled again. He caught her before she fell. She tried to pull back, whispering, "Don't touch me. Please." He nodded slowly. "All right. I won't." He stepped aside, keeping distance, but still walked beside her. At a small landing field, an old transport ship waited, dusty, patched with metal plates. He helped her climb aboard, then handed her a flask of water. She hesitated before drinking, as if it might be a trick. But when the water touched her tongue, she closed her eyes. For the first time in months, it was clean. He watched quietly. "What's your name?" he asked. She shook her head. "Don't have one," he nodded again. "Then you can borrow mine for now." "I'm Daniel." She blinked, confused. "Borrow?" He smiled faintly. "Until you remember yours." The ship lifted off slowly, leaving the auction far behind. Through the small window, the alien girl looked down at the shrinking city, the place where she had been forgotten, sold, and broken. A tear slid down her cheek. She didn't know why she was crying. Maybe because for the first time she wasn't behind bars. Daniel sat in the pilot's seat, glancing at her reflection in the glass. "You're safe now," he said quietly, but she didn't believe it yet. She had heard those words before, empty promises from cruel men. Still, there was something different in his voice. It wasn't pity, it was gentle. She pulled the jacket tighter around her small frame and whispered under her breath, "Safe," as if testing the word. Outside, the stars began to appear. The ship flew toward the horizon, carrying two souls who didn't yet know they would change each other's fate forever. And in the dim light of the cockpit, for the first time in her life, the last alien slave on the block began to hope. The ship landed on a quiet stretch of land far from the city. The air smelled clean, no smoke, no metal, no shouting. Just the soft hum of wind across empty fields. The alien girl, still wrapped in Daniel's jacket, stepped out slowly. Her bare feet touched the grass for the first time in years. She froze, staring down at it like it was something magical. Daniel watched her silently. "Welcome home," he said. She didn't reply. Home. The word meant nothing to her anymore. Her world was gone, her people gone. The only homes she knew were cages. Daniel's cabin stood near a small river built from old ship panels and wood. It looked rough, but it was warm and quiet. Smoke rose from a metal chimney. The sound of water trickling nearby gave the place a strange peace. Inside, everything was simple. A single bed, a small table, a shelf full of old tools. The girl stayed near the door, afraid to move. "You can sit," Daniel said, setting down a pot of soup. She didn't move. He sighed, sitting at the table. "You're not my prisoner. You don't need to ask permission here." Her hands trembled. "I don't understand." "You will," he said gently. "It takes time." He placed a bowl of soup near her. The smell filled the room, warm, rich, real food. She stared at it as if it might vanish. Slowly, she crouched, picked up the spoon, and tasted a drop. Then another. Then she started to eat faster and faster, like she hadn't eaten in weeks. Daniel didn't stop her. He only said, "Slow down. There's more." She froze mid-bite, confused. "More?" She looked at him again, trying to read his face. There was no anger there, no threat. Only quiet patience. After a while, she whispered, "Why, are you kind to me?" Daniel looked at the small fire burning in the stove. "Because someone should be." The girl lowered her head. "Kindness always costs something." He gave a small smile. "Then I'll pay it." That night, she refused to sleep on the bed. She crawled under the table instead, curling up with the blanket he gave her. Daniel didn't argue. He just turned off the lights and said, "Good night, Lyra." She blinked in the dark. "Lyra, you need a name," he said softly. "That one sounds right," she whispered at once. "Lyra." The sound felt strange on her tongue, but not unpleasant. For the first time, she had a name again. In the middle of the night, she woke from a nightmare. Screams, fire, the sound of whips. She gasped and pressed her hands over her ears. Daniel, half asleep, looked over. "You okay?" She shook her head, trembling. He didn't come close. He only said, "You're safe. Nobody's here but us." She listened. There were no guards, no chains. Only the sound of crickets and the soft rustle of the river outside. She slowly relaxed, whispering to herself, "Safe, safe," until she fell asleep again. Days passed like that. Quietly. Slowly. Daniel worked during the day, fixing machines, planting crops, hunting for food. Lyra stayed close but never spoke much. She watched him from the window, curious about everything he did. Once she saw him repair a broken drone, his hands steady and sure. He caught her staring and smiled. "You can help if you want." She hesitated but moved closer. He handed her a small wrench. Her fingers shook, but she tried. For a moment, she forgot her fear. When the drone started working, it made a soft beep. Lyra jumped back, startled. Daniel laughed softly. "See? Not all machines hurt." She smiled for the first time in a small, fragile smile. He saw it and pretended not to notice, giving her space to keep it. One evening, it started to rain. Lyra stepped outside, lifting her face to the sky. Water touched her skin, washing away the dust. She stretched her hands out, eyes wide with wonder. Daniel watched from the doorway as she whispered, "It's cold, but it feels alive." He nodded. "That's what freedom feels like." She looked at him, unsure what that word really meant. But something inside her shifted, a small spark that had been sleeping for too long. That night, before she lay down under the table again, she whispered, "Good night." Daniel. It was the first time she said his name. Daniel smiled quietly in the dark. He didn't know it yet, but in that single word, something deep had begun. Trust. Fragile and real. and for the first time in many years, the last alien slave slept without chains. Morning sunlight crept through the cabin window, painting soft lines across the floor. Lyra sat near the fire, holding a small metal cup in her hands. The warmth felt strange but comforting. For the first time in her life, she wasn't afraid to wake up. Daniel walked in quietly, wiping the grease from his hands. "You're up early," he said. She nodded, eyes still watching the flame. "It's quiet here," she whispered. "Too quiet. Sometimes I think I'm dreaming." He smiled faintly. "Then it's a good dream. Means you're healing." The word healing felt foreign to her. In the camps, there was no such thing. You either survived or disappeared. But here, in this small wooden house, something was changing inside her. Slowly, gently, like a wound closing after years of bleeding. Daniel gave her a piece of bread and gestured toward the open door. "Come outside. You should see the sunrise." Lyra followed him to the field. Dew covered the grass. The sky burned with gold and pink light, and mist floated above the river. She had never seen anything like it. Her silver eyes widened as she whispered, "It's beautiful." Daniel glanced at her. "It's been here every morning. You just needed to look." For a while they stood in silence. The world felt still, peaceful. She closed her eyes and breathed deeply, trying to remember this feeling. Over the next few days, Lyra began helping him around the cabin. She learned how to boil water, wash clothes, and clean the tools. She wasn't perfect, but Daniel never raised his voice. Whenever she made a mistake, he simply showed her again, calm and patient. One afternoon, she found an old machine lying behind the cabin, a farming bot, rusted and broken. Curious, she touched the panel, wiping off dust. Daniel saw her and called out, "Careful, that thing hasn't worked in years." "I can fix it," she said quietly. He raised a brow. "You know machines?" She nodded. "My people built most of them before the war." Her voice faded, but Daniel smiled. "Then maybe you can teach me something." She blinked, surprised. No one had ever asked her to teach anything. Slowly, she knelt beside the bot, opening its metal frame. Her thin fingers worked carefully, reconnecting wires and adjusting gears. Daniel watched, impressed. When the bot's light blinked green and it stood up with a soft hum, Lyra stepped back in shock. It worked. She looked at Daniel, uncertain what to do. He grinned. "Told you. You're healing." Lyra felt something stir inside her. Pride. Real pride. The bot whirred and rolled away, its sensors scanning the field. Daniel chuckled. "Guess I've got a new helper." For the first time, Lyra laughed, a small, shy sound. Daniel froze, smiling as if he'd just witnessed a miracle. That night, while Daniel fixed the roof, Lyra sat near the fire again. She touched her collar, the metal band still around her neck. It wasn't locked anymore, but she hadn't taken it off. She didn't know why. Maybe she was afraid that without it, she wouldn't remember who she was. Daniel came inside, wiping sweat from his brow. "You should sleep soon. Tomorrow's going to be busy." She nodded but didn't move. "Daniel?" she said softly. "Yeah? Why did you save me?" He looked at her for a long time before answering. "Because no one else did, but I'm not human," he shrugged. "You don't need to be. Pain looks the same on everyone." His words hit her deeply. She turned away quickly, blinking back tears. No one had ever seen her as anything but property. But this man, this quiet human, looked at her and saw someone. Later that night, she stepped outside again. The rain had started, light and gentle. She raised her hands to the sky, letting the water wash her face. The cold drops ran down her cheeks like tears she hadn't been able to cry before. Daniel watched from the doorway, silent. The rain fell harder, surrounding them in a soft curtain of silver. Lyra whispered, "I used to think water was only for the strong. In the camps we drank from puddles. Now it feels like the sky forgives me." Daniel's voice came quietly through the rain. "The sky doesn't forgive, Lyra. It just gives everyone another chance." She looked at him, eyes glimmering under the stormlight. For the first time, she believed him. Inside the cabin that night, she slept on the bed, not under the table. And for the first time in her life, the alien girl dreamed not of running or hiding, but of beginning again. The peace didn't last. Weeks passed, and Lyra began to smile more, to speak more freely. She walked through the fields, feeling the wind on her face. Daniel had even taught her how to fish in the nearby river. Life, for a short time, felt almost normal. But normal never stays long in a world built on scars. One gray morning, Daniel was repairing the fence when he noticed a flicker in the sky, a flash of silver against the clouds. Not thunder. Not lightning. A ship. He froze, tools still in hand. The emblem on the hull, a red wing and black stripe. He knew that symbol too well. Alliance Patrol. The same kind that hunted down escaped slaves. He turned toward the cabin. Lyra! Inside, Lyra was humming quietly, trying to braid her hair in front of a small, cracked mirror. When she saw his face through the doorway, her heart dropped. She recognized that look, the look of fear mixed with urgency. What's wrong? She asked softly. Get inside the cellar, Daniel said. Now, she didn't ask questions. The tone in his voice made her legs move on their own. She followed him through the kitchen, down a narrow set of stairs beneath a trapdoor. Dust filled the air and the space was small. Shelves, boxes, old farming tools. Daniel crouched beside her. Don't make a sound no matter what happens. Lyra grabbed his sleeve, her voice trembling. Is it them? He hesitated, then nodded. Yes, her eyes widened. They'll take me back. He looked at her firmly. Not while I'm breathing. Then he shut the door and went back up. Minutes later, the sound of engines roared overhead. The patrol ship landed near the field, sending a gust of dust through the crops. 2 soldiers stepped out, tall, armored, rifles glowing blue. Daniel walked toward them slowly, wiping his hands on a rag, pretending to be calm. Morning, he said, voice steady. Didn't expect visitors this far from town. One of the soldiers stepped closer. We're tracking an escaped alien slave. Female, silver hair around your height. Daniel shrugged. Haven't seen anyone like that. The soldier's visor glowed red as he scanned the area. You live alone? Mostly, Daniel replied. Mostly? Daniel forced a small smile. Got a few machines that don't listen well. The soldiers didn't laugh. They began walking toward the cabin. Daniel's heart pounded, but his face stayed calm. One soldier peered through the window. Mind if we look around? Daniel stood in their way. I do mind. You need a warrant for that, don't you? The other soldier smirked. We don't need permission to recover property. That word, property, made Daniel's jaw tighten. He took a slow step forward, his voice low. You call her property again and you'll regret it. The soldier raised his gun. Careful, human. You're not her protector. Daniel didn't move. Maybe not. But she's under my roof, and you're not taking her. The tension crackled like electricity. Then one of the soldiers shoved Daniel aside and pushed the door open. From below, Lyra heard boots stomp across the floorboards. Her hands covered her mouth to stop a scream. Every sound brought back the camps, the cages, the pain. Her chest burned. Then she heard Daniel's voice, rough, angry, desperate. I told you to leave. A loud crack filled the air, the sound of a gun. Lyra's eyes went wide. She pushed the trapdoor open, crawling up despite her shaking limbs. Daniel stood bleeding near the table, clutching his arm. The soldiers aimed their rifles again. Something inside Lyra snapped. The fear that had once chained her turned into fire. She screamed, but a sound filled with years of pain, and the lights in the cabin flickered. The soldiers froze. Energy crackled around her skin, bright blue and wild. Her kind had always been gifted, once proud, once powerful, before the war turned them into slaves. With one motion, she threw her hands forward. The rifles ripped apart like paper, metal twisting in midair. The soldiers fell back, terrified. She's unstable, one shouted. They scrambled toward the ship. Engines roared and the patrol fled into the clouds, vanishing as quickly as they came. Lyra dropped to her knees, the energy fading. She was shaking, tears falling down her cheeks. Daniel stumbled toward her, pressing his injured arm. You saved me, he said softly. She looked up, crying harder. No, you saved me first. Daniel smiled weakly. Guess we're even then. She pressed her hands against his wound, trying to stop the bleeding. I was right, she whispered through tears. They'll never stop hunting me. Daniel looked into her eyes. Then we don't hide anymore. We fight. Outside, the wind blew through the empty field, carrying away the scent of smoke and fear. Inside the cabin, an alien girl held a bleeding human, 2 souls bound by something neither of them had planned. But both now swore to protect. Night fell heavy and cold. The stars above the ruined fields looked sharp and distant. like eyes watching from the dark. Inside the small cabin, Daniel lay weak on the floor, blood seeping through the cloth tied around his arm. His breathing was shallow, his skin pale. Lyra knelt beside him, her hands trembling. "Stay awake," she whispered. "You can't leave me now." Daniel gave a faint smile. "Takes more than that to stop me." But his eyes kept closing. Lyra pressed harder on the wound, tears mixing with the dirt on her cheeks. The memory of the soldier's ship still burned in her mind. If they returned, Daniel wouldn't survive another fight. She had to move. "Now, I'll fix this," she said, her voice breaking. "I'll save you like you saved me." Daniel tried to speak, but she was already gone. The forest behind the cabin was thick and silent. Lyra moved through the shadows barefoot, her body aching but her mind sharp. She remembered Daniel once mentioning a supply post an hour's walk away. Human soldiers sometimes left medkits there after patrols. Every step felt like fire, but she kept going. Branches cut her skin, cold wind bit at her face, yet she didn't stop. Every breath was a promise. He didn't give up on me. I won't give up on him. After what felt like forever, she saw the faint glow of a light ahead, a patrol tent guarded by 2 men and a hovering drone. Lyra crouched low behind a tree, her heart pounding. She could hear them talking. "Command says we're heading back to base tomorrow," one said. "Good. I'm tired of chasing ghosts," the other muttered. Lyra scanned the area, a crate marked with a red cross near the fire. Medical supplies. That was what she needed. She closed her eyes, breathing slowly. Her hands began to glow faintly, that same blue energy that had frightened her before. But this time she didn't fight it. She focused it. The drone's lights flickered. Its sensors glitched. One guard cursed. "Hey, what's wrong with this thing?" As they tried to reset it, Lyra moved, silent, quick, like a shadow. She slipped behind the tent, grabbed the crate, and vanished into the trees before they even noticed. Her heart raced as she ran. The crate was heavy, but she held it tight. When she finally reached the cabin, her legs gave out. She fell beside Daniel, gasping for air. He opened his eyes weakly. "You came back." She laughed softly through tears. "I said I would." Lyra tore open the crate and found bandages, syringes, and antiseptic gel. Her fingers moved fast, cleaning his wound, sealing it with trembling care. Daniel groaned in pain, but she kept working. When she finished, she covered him with the blanket and sat beside him, watching his chest rise and fall. Hours passed. She didn't sleep. She listened to the soft sound of rain against the roof. Every drop reminded her of the night she felt hope again. When dawn came, light crept into the cabin. Daniel stirred. His eyes opened slowly. "You didn't sleep?" Lyra shook her head, smiling weakly. "I was afraid you wouldn't wake up." He looked at the supplies beside him. "You went out there alone?" "I had to," Daniel chuckled softly. "You're braver than you think, Lyra." Her smile faded as she whispered, "I was afraid. Not of dying, but of losing you." Daniel reached out, his hand resting on hers. "Then we'll make sure neither of us has to." For a moment, neither spoke. Outside, sunlight broke through the clouds. Birds began to sing again, timid but alive. Lyra stood and walked to the doorway. The world looked different now, and still scarred, still dangerous, but somehow brighter. She whispered, "I used to be nothing. Now I have something worth fighting for." Behind her, Daniel's voice was soft but strong again. "You're not nothing, Lyra. You never were." She turned, tears glimmering in her silver eyes. "You gave me a reason to believe that." And as the sun rose higher, casting gold light over the broken land, Lyra finally understood. She was no longer the girl sold on the auction block. She was someone who could protect, who could save, who could love. For the first time in her life, she wasn't waiting to be rescued. She was the rescuer. The days after the attack felt like waking from a long nightmare. The cabin that once echoed with silence now held the soft rhythm of 2 lives rebuilding. Daniel's wound healed slowly, leaving a thin scar that ran down his arm, a mark he wore with quiet pride. Lyra insisted on helping him every step of the way. When he tried to lift heavy tools, she stopped him. When he forgot to rest, she glared until he did. Daniel laughed more now, teasing, "Didn't know I was marrying a commander." Lyra blinked, confused by the word marrying. "What does that mean?" He paused, looking at her for a long moment. "It means someone you choose to stand beside for all the days ahead." Her lips parted slightly, as if the meaning was too large to fit inside her heart. Then maybe. I already did. The land around the cabin began to change. Together they repaired the fences, planted seeds, and cleared out broken machines. The soil, long ignored, started to bloom again. Strange blue flowers from Lyra's home mixed with Earth's golden grass, painting the valley in two colors, like their worlds slowly learning to live together. The nearby town soon noticed. Rumors spread like wind through the market streets. Did you hear? That human's keeping an alien woman. They say she used to be a slave. Unnatural. Disgusting. One afternoon, Daniel and Lyra came to trade supplies. Conversation stopped when they entered. Eyes followed them, cold judging. A shopkeeper refused to meet Lyra's gaze as she handed over credits. Daniel's jaw tightened. When they stepped outside, Lyra said softly, "They hate me." "They fear what they don't understand," he replied. "I can leave, Daniel. I don't want you to lose your people because of me." He turned to her, firm but gentle. "You are my people." For a moment, the noise of the town faded. Lyra looked up at him, her heart thudding like it had never learned rhythm before. No one had ever claimed her like that, and not as property, not as pity, but as something equal. Something real. That evening, as the sun melted behind the hills, Lyra sat near the river with her feet in the water. Daniel joined her, tossing small pebbles into the current. "Do you ever miss it?" he asked quietly. "Your world." Lyra looked at the reflection of the stars on the surface. "Every day. But I think it lives here now." She placed a hand over her heart. "As long as I remember it, it still breathes." Daniel nodded. "Then it's not gone." A soft wind passed between them. Lyra leaned her head against his shoulder. The silence between them was not heavy anymore. It was warm, peaceful. Later that night, Lyra found the courage to ask something that had haunted her since the day he found her. "Why me, Daniel? Out of all the ones you could have saved?" He smiled faintly. "Because when I looked at you that day, I didn't see an alien. I saw someone who'd been treated like nothing, and I couldn't let the world keep doing that." She lowered her eyes, whispering, "And now?" He reached out, lifting her chin gently. "Now I see someone stronger than anyone I've ever known." Lyra's eyes shimmered under the candlelight. She wanted to speak, but words weren't enough, so instead she took his hand, the same hand that once freed her, and pressed it against her heart. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. Their small farm grew. Animals returned to the fields. The air no longer smelled of rust or ash. Sometimes travelers stopped by, hungry, wounded, or lost. Daniel and Lyra never turned anyone away. One evening, a young girl arrived, shivering and scared. Lyra brought her food and whispered softly, "You're safe now." Those same words Daniel had once spoken to her, and when the girl smiled through her tears, Lyra understood how far she had come, from a nameless slave to a symbol of hope. Inside the cabin, Daniel watched her quietly, pride in his eyes. The once broken alien had become the heart of their new world. The night sky stretched endlessly above their little home, stars shimmering like a promise. Daniel stood beside Lyra at the doorway. "You know," he said with a grin, "when I bought you that day, I thought I was saving a life." She looked at him, smiling softly. "You did?" He shook his head. "No, Lyra, you saved mine." Their hands met, fingers locking gently, two survivors, two souls from different worlds, standing under the same sky, and as the wind carried the scent of their blooming field, it whispered the truth neither of them needed to say aloud. This was no longer the story of a master and a slave. It was the beginning of them. Years passed like quiet waves. Seasons changed, fields bloomed, and the little cabin that once stood in isolation became a place of whispers, a home of peace where two souls, one human and one alien, lived beyond the chains of war. The valley had transformed. The blue flowers from Lyra's world covered the ground each spring, glowing softly under the moonlight. Humans from nearby towns often came to trade but stayed to listen to the story of the last alien slave who became a wife. Lyra and Daniel never called it a miracle. To them it was simply life, built with patience, sweat, and trust. But to others it became a legend. One morning, Lyra stood by the river, the same place where she had once feared her reflection. Now she saw strength there. Her silver hair, clean and bright, shimmered in the sunlight. Daniel approached from behind, his step steady but slower with age. You're thinking again, he teased gently. She smiled. Always. He joined her by the water, looking at the distant horizon. It's been 10 years, he said softly. Since the auction? Lyra nodded. 10 years since you called me by a name I didn't know I wanted. Daniel chuckled. And 10 years since you stopped running from your past. She looked at him, her eyes tender. I didn't stop running, Daniel. I just found someone worth running toward. He reached out, brushing her cheek. You always say things that sound wiser than me. Because you listen, she said simply. By evening, guests began to arrive. Humans, aliens, and hybrid children who had been born into this new world of peace. The air buzzed with quiet joy. Tonight was special. It wasn't just a celebration of survival. It was a renewal, a vow they had promised to make when the world was ready to accept them. Lyra wore a long gown made of woven fiber, soft and pale like starlight. Around her neck hung a single silver ring, Daniel's old collar piece reshaped into a pendant. From chain to circle, from ownership to unity. Daniel stood near the wooden arch that overlooked their field. His clothes were plain, but his eyes carried warmth that spoke louder than any crown. When Lyra approached, the crowd fell silent. The sunset painted the valley gold, the wind moving through the flowers like a living ocean. Daniel took her hands. When I first saw you, you were afraid to look up, he said quietly. Now when you walk, the whole sky follows you. Lyra's lips trembled with emotion. When you found me, I didn't know what it meant to live. You didn't just save me, Daniel. You gave me back to myself. The humans and aliens watching felt the weight of their words. Not just a bond between two beings, but between two worlds, once divided by hate. Daniel continued, voice steady. This vow isn't about ownership or saving or debt. It's about choice. I choose you, again and again, for every dawn that follows. Tears slipped down Lyra's cheeks. And I choose you. Even when stars fade, I will still find you in the dark. They sealed their vow not with ceremony but with silence, the kind that needs no words. The crowd erupted in gentle applause, many crying quietly. Children ran through the glowing flowers, laughing. As night settled, Daniel and Lyra sat together near the fire. The stars stretched endlessly above, reflecting on the river like scattered diamonds. Daniel looked up. You think they're watching us? Lyra smiled. Who? Our worlds. The ones that came before. The ones we lost. She leaned closer. Then let them see. Let them see what love built after hate tried to destroy everything. Later, when the guests had left and only the sound of crickets filled the air, Lyra walked to the field alone. She knelt, touching the soil, the same ground that had once been hard and empty. Thank you, she whispered to the stars. For him, for this life. Behind her, Daniel's voice came soft and warm. Talking to the sky again? She turned, smiling through tears. It listens. He walked over and placed his arm around her. Together they watched the horizon, where blue petals shimmered under the moon. Daniel whispered, You were the last slave on the block. But in the end, you were the first to show us what freedom really means. Lyra rested her head on his shoulder. Freedom isn't being unchained, she said quietly. It's being loved without fear. The fire crackled, the stars glowed brighter, and the wind carried their laughter across the valley, a song of redemption and hope. And long after they were gone, people still told their story, not as a tale of war, not as a tale of difference, but as the story of two souls who proved that compassion, not power, is what keeps the universe alive.